On this election day in the United States, Americans prepare to render a midterm judgment on President Donald Trump. A Minnesota woman born in Somalia is poised to win an election to the U.S. Congress. And Cameroon's president promises the defeat of terrorism in his inauguration, but makes no mention of more than 80 school children and teachers abducted on Monday. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui. You are in for Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin with tragedy on high seas. At least 17 migrants have died in the space of 24 hours while trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea from North Africa to Spain, according to the Spanish Coast Guard. More than 100 others were rescued. 2 rafts were found in the western Mediterranean between the Iberian Peninsula, Morocco and Algeria, with 80 people on board and 13 dead. They were taken to the Spanish North African enclave of Melilla. The Coast Guard also found 4 bodies and rescued 22 men in the Atlantic off the southern Spanish city of Cadiz. Spain is now the main destination for undocumented migrants and refugees from Africa and the Middle East trying to reach Europe for a better life. Through 2018, there have been almost 100,000 arrivals throughout the whole Mediterranean and almost 2,000 missing or dead. More than 47,000 people made the dangerous journey to Spain, often on flimsy boats. Now we'll have more news from the continent shortly, but now we turn our attention to the sharply divided U.S. midterm election. Voters here are heading to the polls Tuesday to elect a new Congress and to render a midterm judgment on President Donald Trump. The results of Tuesday's election could shift the balance of power in Washington and alter the next 2 years of Trump's presidency. We get more from VOA national correspondent Jim Malone.
God bless the
President Donald Trump on the campaign trail in Tennessee, blasting Democrats on the immigration issue as he battles to save the Republican majority in the Senate.
Democrats want to invite caravan after caravan of illegal aliens to pour into our country. I don't think so. No nation can allow its borders to be overrun. And that's an invasion. I don't care what they say. I don't care what the fake media says. That's an invasion of our country.
Hope is still out there. We just have to stand up and speak for it.
Trump's predecessor, former President Barack Obama, has also been a force on the campaign trail on behalf of Democrats.
When you vote, Illinois, you can reject that kind of politics. When you participate in the political process, you can be a check on bad behavior. When you vote, Illinois, you can choose hope over fear.
Early turnout has been huge, with voters in both parties looking at the midterms as a referendum on President Trump, says expert John Hudak.
This is a president who wants this midterm to be a referendum on him, largely because he thinks his own popularity is so great that it will carry Republicans across the finish line.
But Trump is not only battling Democrats, he's battling history, says analyst John Fortier.
Well, the big picture is that midterm elections go against the president's party. I think there will be no difference here. The Democrats will do quite well in the House of Representatives and the governorships and state legislatures.
Historically, Republicans are more reliable voters in midterm elections. That puts pressure on Democrats to make sure their supporters get out and vote, says Gallup pollster Frank Newport.
Under the expectation that Republican voters typically are more likely to turn out, can Democrats energize people who identify with the Democratic Party to turn out and vote for their candidates?
And turnout will be key if Democrats hope to regain the majority in the House, says Jim Kessler.
The House has been a rubber stamp for the Trump agenda, it will no longer be a rubber stamp. So anything that gets done will have to be done on a bipartisan basis.
Democrats are favored to pick up House seats, perhaps enough to reclaim the majority. Republicans hope to defend their narrow 51 to 49 seat edge in the Senate, thanks to last-minute campaign help from President Trump.
We will never surrender, and we will always fight on to victory.
Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
Now for more on the U.S. midterm elections, VOA reporter Salem Solomon joins me live from Key Elementary School in Arlington, Virginia. Salem, welcome again to Africa 54. Let me know what you're seeing over there. How is the voter turnout at the polling station?
Great to be here, Esther. The voter turnout is very interesting to see. As you can see behind me, the line has been decreasing now, but earlier in the morning, it's been a great turnout. Actually, I spoke to a Democratic observer here, Dave Tevlin, who just was telling me that the lines have been locking in average of 36 minutes. And so the foot traffic has been very heavy, and we've been seeing a lot of people braving the weather in the morning. It's been raining. The weather hasn't been forgiving. And so it's been raining, and people were coming out enthusiastically. And unlike many states, Virginia does not offer early voting, so people have to come here in person to vote, or they have to request what is called an absentee ballot. That means they have to vote through mail. And so a lot of people have been showing their enthusiasm across Virginia. Virginia is what's known as a purple state, which means that it's not reliably a red state, a Republican state, or a blue state, which is a Democratic state, but you know, somewhere in between. And so to see a lot of people turn out, it was a very interesting thing to watch. It's not really as competitive here. In terms of the polling, the congressional district here is Don Beyer. He's a Democrat. It's not considered competitive, but overall, this is a battleground with several key races.
So when you talk to the voters there, what are the key issues? Do they see, are they resonating with what the president is talking about? What are when you look at the Democrats also campaigning, what do they say the core issues for them are in this midterm election?
So most of the people that I spoke to focused on local issues, issues that directly affect them, like healthcare, economy, and you know, things that are directly affecting them. And so immigration was also one of the issues that some of the people that I spoke to raised. But also some people raised concerns about the direction the country is taking. Many people I spoke to voted, came here to vote and showed their civic duties and to participate in a democracy. And so, you know, that was more important to them as well.
Thank you, Salem, so much for reporting for us from Arlington, Virginia. That's VOA Salem Solomon. And joining me here in the studio with more on the U.S. midterm elections is VOA's Steve Reddish, who has been closely following the U.S. elections. Steve, welcome to Africa 54.
It's a pleasure.
You know, you're so seasoned on this. Break it down for us, especially when you think about people in Africa watching these midterm elections in the U.S. and what it means when we talk about having two chambers, the House of Representatives, the Senate. What does that mean if the president wins both or if he loses?
Well, right now, the president is a Republican, and Republicans are in charge of both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House of Representatives, the lower house, is got 435 members. They run every 2 years. Right now, the Republicans have the majority. The Democrats need to pick up 23 seats in order to flip and change the balance of power in the House of Representatives. As you can see here, there's the graphics, where things stand there. In the Senate, it's the upper house. They're a little bit more deliberative. They have 100 members elected to 6-year terms. 1/3 of them are up every 2 years, or up in every 2-year cycles. So right now, the Democrats have to defend a lot more seats than the Republicans do in the Senate. So it's much more likely, because as we heard earlier, the president's party in power usually loses seats in the midterm elections halfway through the 4-year term of the president. So If the Democrats are able to take the House, what that means, it'll be a voting bloc against President Trump's policies, which include immigration, include trade policies. They have the power to investigate the Trump administration and Trump administration members for corruption, and also look at those policies and see where they go wrong.
And that brings us to this heated campaign. You would have thought it's the presidential race and not the midterm elections. Why has it been so hot? You see the Republicans out there, you see the president campaigning, and you see former presidents and key Democrats all over the country.
President Trump has been campaigning. He has put it out there himself. We heard earlier from Jim Malone that he's put himself it's a referendum on President Trump. Usually these midterm elections are a referendum on the new president who just took power. In the past 50 years, only twice has a president in power been able to pick up seats in Congress. Every other time, they've lost them. So it is a referendum on President Trump and President Trump's policies.
Now, but what are the core issues if you look across the divide, whether the Republicans or whether the Democrats? What are the national issues that would probably bind the people together?
The key issues right now are health care. The Republicans are trying to repeal what President Barack Obama put out there as far as health care is concerned. Immigration, which has not been, there hasn't been an immigration bill, new immigration laws coming out of Congress since the 1980s. So that needs updating, and there's been a constant battle over the last 20 years about who comes into this country and for what reasons.
Steve, very briefly, what do we expect tomorrow? When do we expect the results to start streaming in?
Around 2300 UTC, the first polls close. And there are some races in those two states that close. If the Democrats win them, it should be a Democratic night. If the Republicans win them, it should be a Republican night. And round about 5 o'clock UTC, we should know who won.
We should know who won, and then we start from there.
And then the next election starts.
The next. All right, Steve, thank you so much.
Thank you.
VOA's correspondent Steve Reddish breaking it all down for us here in the studio. Now, Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar is on the verge of making history in American politics Tuesday when she is favored to win a seat in the U.S. Congress and become the first former refugee and the first woman from Africa to join the House. Omar says using politics to make a positive impact and expand democracy is important to her. For producer Abdulaziz Osman, Robert Raphael reports from Minneapolis.
"36-year-old Ilhan Omar came to Minnesota 20 years ago after fleeing from war-torn Somalia and spending 4 years in a refugee camp in Kenya. Omar is expected to easily defeat her Republican challenger, Jennifer Zielinski, in Minnesota's solidly Democratic 5th Congressional District. If Omar wins Tuesday, she could be joined in the House by another Muslim woman, Democrat Rashida Tlaib from Detroit, who is poised to win a seat in her race for the House of Representatives. Omar says that if she goes to Washington, she will take on President Donald Trump, who she says is promoting policies that prevent people like her from coming to America.
These policies are very dangerous. I think they go really against the ideals of this nation, and I hope to go to Washington with colleagues who are like-minded for us to take back the House and possibly the Senate and hold him accountable to the policies that he's pushing that are about fear and division.
Ilhan Omar made history in 2016 when she joined the Minnesota House of Representatives and became the first Somali American lawmaker in her state, which is home of the country's largest Somali American community.
The chance of using politics as a tool to create positive change really has been one that has inspired me to get involved in politics, to stay engaged in the opportunity of expanding our democracy for everyone, and running to really create policies that will have positive impact on people's lives.
In a year with a record number of women running for public office, Omar inspired many Muslim women across the nation, including Hodan Hassan, who is running for the Minnesota House of Representatives.
The reason why many women are running are two things. One, hashtag Me Too movement, and then number two, Donald Trump. Donald Trump was elected in the basis of he continuously disrespected women. So I think those two combined have ignited a lot of women to change the status quo. And one of the ways you can change the status quo is run for an office.
The midterm election comes at a critical time as the United States faces a bitter partisan divide. Hassan says politicians should bring the country together and spread more unifying messages. For Abdulaziz Osman in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Robert Raffel, VOA News.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Still ahead on Africa 54, where are Cameroon's kidnapped students? But first, a look at Tuesday's headlines.
In Cameroon, President Paul Biya, one of Africa's longest-serving rulers, is sworn in for a 7th term after disputed elections and amid mounting unrest in an English-speaking region. In Madagascar, the country prepares for the first round of its presidential election with 3 ex-presidents as front-runners. In Tunisia, 13 new cabinet ministers named by Prime Minister Youssef Chahed in hopes of tackling the economic crisis. In Malawi, thousands of Mozambican refugees are returning home from Malawi after an easing of tensions between Mozambique's ruling Frelimo party. Finally, in Kenya, We Share Solar in the rural part of the country is bringing solar-powered suitcases to light darkened classrooms and eliminate health complications caused by previously using kerosene lamps.
Could be French,
English,
Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African Beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
Cameroonian President Paul Biya on Tuesday warned Anglophone separatists to lay down their arms or face the full force of the law, one day after dozens of school children were abducted in the rebel region of Bamenda. Reporter David Doyle has more.
Cameroon's army is searching the area around the city of Bamenda after 79 children were kidnapped from a school. The abduction happened before dawn on Monday in the English-speaking northwest region, where violence between Anglophone secessionists and government forces fled earlier this year. Officials say the children, their principal and a driver were taken into the bush outside the town. Anglophone secessionists have imposed curfews and closed schools as a part of their protest against President Paul Biya's French-speaking government. They say the English-speaking minority are marginalized. An army spokesman said separatist militias were most likely responsible for the kidnapping, but a separatist spokesman denied any involvement, instead blaming government soldiers. On Monday, the governor of the region visited the school and insisted he was doing everything he could to get the children back.
Despite what happened here, The state government will not surrender.
The separatist movement gathered pace in 2017 after a government crackdown on peaceful demonstrations. One of the original gripes was that French-speaking teachers were being deployed to English-speaking schools. Violence intensified this year, including during an army crackdown in which civilians were killed. Many people have fled Bamenda and other centres to seek refuge in more peaceful francophone regions.
L'intégrité et l'indépendance.
The kidnapping also comes as President Biya is sworn in. He's been in power for 36 years, his election victory cementing his place as one of Africa's longest-serving rulers. Looming over his re-election is the separatist issue, as well as allegations of ballot stuffing and intimidation.
That report was filed by David Doyle of Reuters. The UN Security Council is considering lifting sanctions on Eritrea next week after a rapprochement with Ethiopia. But some members want to maintain some diplomatic pressure to ensure a dispute with Djibouti is resolved. A British drafted resolution proposes the immediate removal of an arms embargo and targeted sanctions, a travel ban and asset freeze imposed on Eritrea. It also strongly encourages Eritrea and Djibouti to work towards normalizing ties and settling a decade-old border dispute. The resolution needs 9 votes in favor of no vetoes by the US, China, Russia, Britain or France. Eritrea has been subjected to a UN arms embargo since 2009 after a UN expert monitoring sanctions on Somalia accused Eritrea of providing political, financial and logistical support to armed groups undermining peace and reconciliation in Somalia. Eritrea has denied the accusations. Thousands of Mozambican refugees are returning home from camps in neighboring Malawi, where they fled to in a bid to escape fighting in their homeland 3 years ago. According to the UN Refugee Agency, tens of thousands of Mozambicans began fleeing into Malawi in December 2015, and that the exodus peaked in early March 2016 at over 250 people per day. Tensions erupted between Mozambique's Frelimo government forces and Renamo guerrillas in 2014, an escalation of a simmering conflict between old foes who fought a 16-year war. Several refugees at the Luwani camp in southern Malawi told reporters that the ongoing peace process has given them the confidence they need to go back. But violence has flared up sporadically in the country since the end of the civil war in 1992, including after Renamo challenged the results of a 2014 election. Mozambique is set to hold presidential, parliamentary and provincial polls in October 2019. Now, many people know that a woman's health, including her diet and exercise habits, can impact the health of her baby even before she gets pregnant. Many women try to shed excess weight and check with their doctors to optimize their health. But until recently, little was known about the role of a father's diet and exercise choices might play. VOA's Carol Pearson reports on a study that shows just like for women, there's a link between the father's health and that of his unborn children.
Just like that, okay?
Matthew Hurt has always made exercise a priority for himself and now for his sons.
I want it to be just natural for them. I don't want it to be a chore, right? I want them to just want to go outside, want to be active, and enjoy life to its fullest.
A study at Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center looked at the impact of fathers' exercise habits on their offspring. It found that even moderate exercise before a baby is conceived provides a health benefit that can last a lifetime.
That resulted in improved metabolic health in their adult offspring. So essentially it improved their glucose metabolism, decreased body weight, and increased their insulin sensitivity.
The research was done with mice. It found that this was due to certain changes in the sperm. As for people, the World Health Organization says 1 in 4 adults worldwide are dangerously inactive. That increases the risk of obesity, high blood pressure, cardiovascular diseases, cancer, and diabetes.
The idea would be that if you have a dad who wants to have a child, if they could exercise maybe just the month prior to conception, that would have a really dramatic effect on their child's life.
The researchers also found that exercise helped even with a poor diet. Sedentary mice fed a high-fat diet passed along negative health issues like obesity and insulin resistance. The scientists were surprised to find that the diet's negative effects were completely reversed by exercise.
A high-fat diet, even a mild high-fat diet, in this case it was only 3 weeks, changed the profile, but exercise kind of restored it back to normal.
More work needs to be done to see if the same applies to humans. But in the animal studies, exercise for the male mouse was key to the health of his offspring. Carol Pearson, VOA News, Washington.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Hong Kong scientists have developed a tiny, soft robot that moves like a caterpillar, which they hope will be capable of delivering drugs within the human body. The flexible robot has hundreds of 1 millimeter long hair-like pointed legs. This reduces the contact area with the surface it moves across, reducing friction and allowing it to move efficiently across both bumpy, dry surfaces and wet ones. It is also able to jump more than 10 times its own length. The prototypes of the robot are already able to lift 100 times their own weight, which the researchers compare to a human lifting a 26-seat minibus. While only millimeters in size, they can cross obstacles as large as 100 times their own height. Next up, a restaurant in Mexico City is giving migrants deported from the United States a second chance. The traditional Texan barbecue restaurant was opened by New Yorker and former English teacher Dan DeFosse. It's called Pinch Gringo, which he says means damn or darn American. However, the word is also strongly associated with cursing in Mexican Spanish. As the United States takes a harder line on immigration, thousands who called the country home are being forced to go. Many working at Pinche Gringo were deported from the U.S. Migrants working at the restaurant are paid higher than average salaries due to the experience they acquired in the U.S. A bronze statue of Egyptian footballer Mohamed Salah, unveiled at an international youth gathering in Egypt, has been criticized for its poor resemblance to the Liverpool striker. The statue depicts Salah with a disproportionately large head and small arms stretched in the celebratory pose that the 26-year-old Egyptian adopted in the latter part of last season. The figure, created by artist Mai Abdallah, was Salah's trademark curly hair and is standing on what appeared to be a pot for plants. Salah has not publicly commented on the statue. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. Tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC Monday through Friday. Thanks for watching and good night from Washington.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Woodwork is any part of a house or building that is made of wood.
Crawl out of the woodwork.
This expression sounds troubling.
I won! I have the winning lottery ticket.
Well, that's great. How much money did you win?
I won $25,000. But please, don't tell anyone.
You're right.